At dawn, the airbase rested quietly beneath a soft veil of mist, the kind of calm that only makes the coming storm feel sharper. Lieutenant Sarah Jensen stood near the hangar, her gaze fixed on the empty runway stretching out before her. She was a skilled pilot, respected but rarely in the spotlight. Her missions were meant to be secret, tucked away in the shadows where few noticed. Today, like many others, she was supposed to remain hidden, watching, waiting, ready to move only when called. But this morning, something was different. Inside the operations room, the low hum of radar screens filled the air. Operators sat in tense silence, eyes glued to their monitors. Sarah felt the change in atmosphere, a quiet tension, like the first crack in a thunderstorm. Her instincts told her to pay attention. The radar blipped with a strange rhythm. It wasn't the usual routine signals. Instead, unfamiliar contacts began to appear, far on the edge of the radar's reach. She didn't need to be told. The subtle shift was enough. The quiet had broken, replaced by an invisible threat moving fast toward the base. The operators exchanged looks, their unease growing. A murmur of concern rippled through the room. Sarah's heart quickened, but she kept her face steady. This was not the time to show fear. The commanding officer stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "We have unidentified aircraft approaching. Estimated time of arrival, less than 10 minutes. Prepare for potential engagement." Sarah's mind raced. The base was designed for surveillance, not for frontline combat. Most of the pilots were trained for reconnaissance, like her. Few were ready for a sudden attack. The enemy's approach was faster and larger than anyone expected. Outside, the morning sun struggled to pierce the clouds, casting long shadows over the tarmac. Sarah glanced toward the hangars where fighter jets stood silent and waiting. The roar of engines had not yet started, but she could feel the tension building like a storm about to break. Her training kicked in. She moved toward the briefing room, where pilots gathered to hear the latest orders. The atmosphere was charged with nervous energy. Each pilot masked their fear with professionalism, but Sarah saw it in their eyes, the unspoken question of whether they were truly ready. The base commander addressed them, his voice steady but urgent. "Enemy jets have been confirmed. Their numbers exceed our estimates. We are vulnerable. We need every available pilot to scramble immediately. This is not a drill." Sarah's stomach tightened. She was not scheduled for combat today. Her role was to stay hidden, gather intelligence, and avoid direct confrontation. But now, the rules had changed. The base was under threat, and every hand had to be on deck. She felt a tap on her shoulder. It was her squadron leader. "Jensen, you're up. Suit up. You're flying." The words hit her like a shockwave. She had trained for this possibility, but never imagined it would come so suddenly. Her fingers trembled slightly as she grabbed her flight gear. There was no time for doubt. Lives depended on her. As she suited up, the distant sound of alarms began to echo through the base. Red lights flashed, casting eerie glows across the concrete. The familiar hum of preparation transformed into a roaring storm of activity. Mechanics hurried to ready the planes, radio operators scrambled to relay commands, and pilots rushed to their jets. Sarah's breath was steady now, focused. She moved with practiced precision, each step bringing her closer to the cockpit that had become both her refuge and her battlefield. Climbing inside, she secured her harness and adjusted her helmet. The cockpit was cramped but comforting, a place where she could control her fate, even when chaos raged outside. The engines came alive with a powerful roar that shook the ground. The base vibrated as jets lined up on the runway, ready to defend their home. Sarah's jet was among them, sleek and deadly despite the calm exterior. Outside, the sky darkened. Thick clouds rolled in, masking the sun and turning the world into a shadowy battleground. Far above, the radar screen blinked urgently. Enemy fighters, dozens of them, swarming toward the base like a dark storm. Sarah's hands gripped the controls tightly. She scanned the horizon, searching for the first sign of the approaching threat. The silence inside the cockpit was broken only by the steady beeping of instruments and the distant crackle of radio chatter. Suddenly, a voice came through her headset, tense but clear. Enemy jets detected. All pilots scramble. Protect the base at all costs. With a burst of power, Sarah's jet accelerated down the runway. The ground blurred beneath her as she lifted off, breaking free from the earth and into the dangerous skies above. The weight of her mission pressed on her shoulders. She was supposed to stay hidden, but now the sky was her battlefield, and she had no choice but to fight death. The alarms shrieked through the base, a harsh reminder that peace was gone. Inside the control room, the radar screen was a frenzy of blinking dots, enemy jets pouring in faster than anyone had predicted. The operators shouted urgent warnings back and forth, their voices cracking under the pressure. Sarah's jet sliced through the sky, but below, the tension was boiling over. This wasn't just a drill, it was real, and the base's survival hung by a thread. Her hands gripped the joystick tightly as she circled above, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the enemy. The sun was now hidden behind thick, rolling clouds, casting a gray pall over the landscape. Visibility was poor, but the radar was clear, enemy fighters closing in, swarming the skies in tight formations. The sheer number of them was overwhelming, a deadly force threatening to crush everything in its path. Back at the base, ground crews scrambled to prepare anti-air defenses. Sarah's squadron leader barked orders into his radio, coordinating with the pilots in the air. The voices over the headset were sharp and clipped, full of urgency and a steely determination to hold the line. But Sarah could hear the edge of fear beneath the professionalism. None of them had faced an attack this massive before. The enemy jets appeared suddenly, breaking through the clouds like shadows unleashed. They moved with precision and ruthless speed, their engines roaring in unison as they descended toward the base. Sarah's heart pounded. This was what she had trained for, but never imagined would happen here. Now, her mind flashed back to training days, to simulations where mistakes meant nothing. Today, every decision was a matter of life and death. She tightened her grip and called out to her squadron, "Stay sharp. Watch your six. They're coming in hot." Her voice was calm but firm, trying to steady herself and others alike. The radios crackled with responses, pilots reporting enemy positions, their voices tense but focused. Missiles streaked through the sky, white trails tearing through the gray clouds. Explosions erupted near the base perimeter, shaking the ground and sending plumes of smoke into the air. The anti-air batteries fired back, tracer rounds arcing in brilliant lines against the darkening sky. It was a deadly dance. One wrong move could mean disaster. Sarah dodged a sudden missile lock, her jet twisting sharply to the side. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt the familiar jolt of evasive maneuvers. The enemy was relentless, pressing the attack without hesitation. She scanned quickly, spotting a wingman struggling to shake off pursuers. Without thinking, she veered toward him, positioning herself between the enemy and her teammate. It was a risky move, but if she hesitated, it could cost lives. The air was thick with tension. Every moment stretched out as Sarah engaged enemy fighters, trading fire and maneuvers in a deadly game of cat and mouse. She felt the sweat bead at her temple despite the cold cockpit. Her training kicked in, muscle memory, guiding her through the chaos. But the numbers were against them. Enemy jets closed ranks, coordinating attacks with frightening efficiency. Sarah's radio buzzed with frantic calls. Some pilots down, others scrambling to regroup. The base was counting on them, but this fight was far from won. Suddenly, a sharp warning beep sounded in her cockpit. Her jet shuddered as a missile grazed the wing, sending a burst of sparks across the metal frame. Panic flared, but she pushed it down, forcing herself to focus. Her mind raced through emergency procedures, scanning for the nearest safe landing zone. The battle above was relentless. Sarah's eyes darted from instrument panel to enemy positions, searching for an opening, any chance to turn the tide. The enemy seemed endless, their jets swarming like a storm with no mercy. A call crackled in her ear. Sarah, regroup with Charlie Squadron at Mark Point Delta. We need to hold them back. She acknowledged quickly and banked hard, weaving through clouds and tracer fire toward the rally point. The sky was a battleground, painted with streaks of light and shadow. As she approached the mark, Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. The fight was far from over, but she refused to give up. Every second counted. Every choice mattered. The enemy jets might swarm like a storm, but she and her squadron were the last line of defense. In the cockpit, her fingers tightened on the controls. The radio buzzed with updates, the ground below vulnerable, but still holding. Sarah glanced down briefly. Smoke curled from distant hangars, the base scarred but alive. This was no longer just a mission. It was a test of survival, a battle for everything they stood for. She steadied her breath and prepared for the next wave. The sky might be full of enemies, but Lieutenant Sarah Jensen was ready to fight, hidden no more. The radio crackled with tension. Lieutenant Jensen, you're cleared for immediate combat deployment. Get to your jet, now. The words were sharp, leaving no room for hesitation. Sarah's heart pounded harder. She had never expected to be called into battle, not like this. Her role was supposed to be behind the scenes, gathering intel, staying hidden. But the enemy was closing in, and everyone was needed on the front line. Her hands moved almost automatically as she grabbed her flight gear. She felt the weight of the helmet in her arms, the coldness of the flight suit as she slipped it on. Every second stretched thin with urgency and fear. The distant roar of engines filled the air as the base prepared for an all-out defense. Sarah's training kicked in, but her mind raced with questions. Was she ready? Could she handle the chaos of real combat? The squadron leader met her as she hurried toward the jets. His eyes were sharp, but there was an unspoken respect in his nod. You're up. Keep your head clear. Trust your training. Sarah swallowed hard and nodded back. There was no time for doubt. As she climbed into the cockpit, the familiar cramped space felt heavier. The controls, buttons, and screens she knew so well were suddenly the difference between life and death. She checked every system quickly, communications, weapons, radar. Everything had to be perfect. Outside, the sky darkened with thick clouds, hiding the sun and adding to the ominous feeling settling over her. The engine roared to life beneath her, shaking the airframe. Sarah's fingers tightened on the joystick as the jet taxied to the runway. Around her, other fighters lined up, engines screaming, ready to take on the incoming storm. The base was vulnerable, but the pilots were determined. They had to be. When the signal came, Sarah's jet surged forward, accelerating faster than her breath could keep pace. The runway disappeared beneath her as she climbed into the gray sky. The clouds swallowed her almost immediately, cold and heavy, but Sarah kept her focus. The radar pinged constantly, enemy contacts closing in fast. Her radio crackled again. Enemy formation spotted 5 miles northwest. Engage with caution. Watch your 6. Sarah's pulse quickened. This was real. The drills, the simulations, they had never felt so distant. Now, every decision mattered. The first enemy jets appeared through the mist like shadows. Their engines growled a harsh warning. Sarah's training took over as she scanned the sky, tracking their movements. The enemy was aggressive, moving with precision and deadly intent. Sarah banked sharply, her jet responding instantly, dodging the first volley of missiles aimed at her squadron. Her eyes flicked to the radar, tracking the multiple threats closing in from all sides. Communication crackled with frantic voices, pilots calling out positions, warning of attacks. Sarah responded quickly, guiding her wingmen and coordinating evasive moves. The sky was chaos, a battlefield painted in streaks of smoke and tracer fire. Despite the adrenaline, a deep part of her stayed calm, the part that knew every training exercise by heart. She counted her breaths, checked her instruments, and made quick decisions to keep herself and her squadron alive. Her jet shook under fire, but she held steady, determined not to let fear take over. She spotted a wingman struggling under heavy fire. Without hesitation, Sarah moved in to assist, positioning herself between him and the enemy. Her jet fired missiles that found their target, disrupting the enemy's attack. The wingman's grateful radio call was a brief relief in the storm. But the battle was far from over. The enemy was relentless, pressing harder with every maneuver. Sarah felt the strain in her muscles, the tightness in her chest. The clouds thickened and visibility worsened, turning the fight into a dangerous blur. Every move was a gamble. Suddenly, a warning beep pierced her concentration. Her jet shuddered as it took a glancing hit. Sparks flew inside the cockpit, and systems flickered dangerously. Panic flashed for a moment, but she forced herself to focus. Survival meant staying calm, adapting, and fighting through the fear. She switched to backup systems and adjusted her flight path, weaving through enemy fire. Her radio crackled again, this time with encouragement. "Hold your ground, Jensen. We're counting on you." The weight of those words settled over her, fueling her resolve. The battle raged on, but Sarah's determination burned brighter than the tracer rounds around her. She was no longer the hidden pilot. She was a fighter, a guardian of the base, and everyone depending on her. The sky was hers to defend, and she wasn't about to let it fall. The engines thundered around her as Sarah climbed higher, the roar of her jet drowning out everything else. The sky above was a swirling mass of gray clouds, the sun a distant, hidden presence. Visibility was poor, but the enemy was out there, waiting. Every second stretched out, thick with tension. Sarah's fingers tightened on the controls, steadying the jet as she prepared for the inevitable clash. Her radar pinged constantly, tracking multiple fast-moving blips. Enemy jets swarmed like a pack, circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but her voice over the radio was steady. "Keep your eyes sharp. They're everywhere." The first missile streaked past her jet, slicing through the cloud cover in a trail of white fire. Sarah dove sharply, feeling the rush of wind as the missile exploded harmlessly behind her. Her training kicked in, muscle memory guiding every move. She banked hard to the left, twisting the jet in a tight arc to shake off another missile lock. The danger was close, visceral, and terrifying. Around her, the sky erupted in chaos. Enemy fighters darted in and out of the clouds, their sleek forms flashing briefly before disappearing again. Tracer fire streaked across the gloom like angry sparks. Sarah felt the heat of a near miss as bullets tore through the air around her cockpit. Her jet shook violently, but she held firm. She caught sight of a squad mate under heavy attack, locked in a deadly dogfight with two enemy jets. Without hesitation, Sarah sped to assist. Her jet roared forward, missiles locked onto one of the attackers. She fired. The missile streaked through the clouds, exploding against the enemy plane's wing. The enemy fighter wobbled, then spiraled downward, smoke trailing behind it. "Nice shot, Jensen." Her squad mate's voice crackled over the radio, relief evident despite the fight. Sarah nodded, though the battle wasn't over. More enemy jets closed in, determined to overwhelm them. The sky was a turbulent battlefield, planes weaving, diving, firing. The roar of engines and bursts of gunfire were deafening inside the cockpit. Every breath Sarah took was measured, every movement precise. Fatigue gnawed at her muscles, but adrenaline kept her sharp. Suddenly, a warning light flashed. "Damage detected," the system announced coldly. Sarah glanced at her instruments. Her jet's left wing had taken a hit, affecting stability. Panic flickered, but she forced it down. She was trained for emergencies. She adjusted the controls carefully, compensating for the damage, refusing to let it slow her. Her radio buzzed urgently. "Sarah, enemy reinforcements inbound. Expect heavy fire." She swallowed hard but steeled herself. There was no turning back. The fight was far from over. The clouds grew thicker, wrapping the sky in a white, foggy blanket. Visibility dropped sharply. Sarah's eyes strained, searching for movement, for any sign of the enemy through the mist. Suddenly, out of a haze, a squadron of enemy jets burst forward, engines screaming. Sarah spun her jet sharply, locking on to the lead fighter. She fired a missile that streaked through the clouds, finding its mark with a burst of fire. One less enemy in the sky, but many more remained. Her squadron rallied around her, pushing back against the overwhelming force. The battle raged on, a dangerous ballet in the clouds. Sarah felt a sudden jolt as her jet was rocked by another near miss. She gritted her teeth, pushing the aircraft to its limits, diving and climbing, dodging enemy fire. Each maneuver was a test of skill and nerve. Through the radio static, a voice called out, "Hold formation. We can't let them break through." Sarah's heart surged. This was more than just a fight. It was a stand for everything they protected. Her mind sharpened, clearing the fog of fear and fatigue. Then, through the thick clouds, a break of sunlight caught her eye. A small clearing in the sky, a chance to regroup. She called to her squadron, "Fall back to the clearing. Regroup and prepare for the next wave." Her voice was calm but urgent, a lifeline amid the storm. One by one, the jets pulled back through the clearing, the tension in the air easing for a moment. Sarah breathed deeply, sweat beading on her forehead. The battle had taken its toll, but she was alive. Her jet was battered but still flying. The sky was still dangerous, but for now they held their ground. Sarah looked out at the horizon, the clouds parting to reveal a faint glow. The fight wasn't over, but so far they had survived, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The brief moment of calm didn't last long. As Sarah's jet hovered in the clearing, engines humming softly, the radio buzzed again with urgent warnings. Enemy forces regrouping. Second wave inbound. Brace for heavy assault. The words sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through her veins. There was no rest in war, only the relentless push forward. Sarah scanned the horizon, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. The clouds had thinned, revealing a cold, gray sky mottled with dark patches, signs of the enemy's return. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down. The base was counting on them, on her. Failure was not an option. Her squadron formed a tight formation, jets slicing through the clearing like silver arrows against the backdrop of a darkening sky. Every pilot was tense but focused, every movement precise. The bond between them was unspoken but strong. This was more than teamwork, it was survival. Suddenly, the silence shattered. The enemy burst through the clouds with renewed fury, their jets streaking toward Sarah's squadron like a swarm of angry hornets. The air filled with the roar of engines and the sharp crack of gunfire. Sarah's jet lurched as tracer rounds peppered the metal skin. "Engage," came the command over the radio. Sarah didn't hesitate. She banked hard to the right, locking onto a fighter coming in fast. Her missile locked in, and with a sharp burst, it tore through the sky and struck the enemy jet. Flames erupted, and the plane spiraled downward. A small victory, but the fight was far from over. The sky exploded into chaos again. Jets twisted and turned, missiles screamed past, and the distant thud of explosions echoed below. Sarah felt the familiar mix of fear and focus. Her training kept her steady, but every second was a battle against panic. Her radio buzzed with frantic voices, wingmen reporting damage, pilots calling for help. Sarah's squadron was thinning, losses mounting. She glanced down at the base below, smoke rising from damaged buildings, the once pristine runways now scarred by craters. The stakes had never felt higher. Suddenly, a missile streaked toward her. Sarah's reflexes kicked in. She pulled the jet into a sudden dive, the missile flying harmlessly past overhead. The ground rushed up toward her, but she kept control, banking sharply to the left. Her heart hammered as she pulled back up into the sky, scanning for the attacker. An enemy jet was closing in fast. Sarah locked her guns and fired, tracers hitting the plane's wing. The enemy faltered, smoke trailing as it tried to escape. Relief was brief. The sky was still a dangerous, swirling battlefield. Then, the unexpected happened. A call crackled through the radio. "Sarah, your wingman's down. Repeat, wingman down." The words hit her like a punch. Her wingman, the one she'd saved earlier, had been shot down. Panic and guilt crashed through her. She fought to push those feelings aside. The mission came first. She needed to protect the base, protect the remaining pilots. She dove deeper into the fray, firing missiles, dodging enemy fire, her jet weaving through the smoky sky. The battle grew fiercer. Enemy jets pressed their attack with relentless aggression. Sarah's jet took hits. Sparks flew inside the cockpit. Alarms blared. Her hands shook, but she refused to lose control. She was a fighter, a protector. Suddenly, she spotted a group of enemy bombers heading toward the base, their payloads deadly and precise. If they reached the ground, the base would be devastated. Sarah called out urgently to her squadron. "Bombers incoming. Intercept now." Her squadron shifted course, racing toward the bombers. Sarah's fingers tightened on the controls. She targeted the lead bomber, firing missile after missile. Explosions bloomed around the enemy formation, but the bombers kept coming, stubborn and dangerous. With every second, the stakes grew higher. Sarah's jet shuddered from damage, but she pushed forward, determined. The bombers were almost within striking distance of the base. Then, with one final, powerful blast, her missile found its mark. The lead bomber erupted in flames, breaking formation. The others faltered, scattering under heavy fire. The threat was reduced, but the battle wasn't over. Sarah's radio crackled with exhausted but hopeful voices. "Good hit, Jensen. Keep it up." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Below, the base still smoldered, but it held. For now, the enemy was pushed back. Sarah's jet banked away, searching the skies for the next threat. The fight had taken everything from her, strength, focus, hope, but she was still flying. She was no longer hidden. She was a guardian of the sky, and she would fight until the last enemy was gone. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning fuel. Sarah's jet shuddered beneath her as the damage worsened, the cockpit alarms blaring an urgent warning. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus despite the pain and fatigue clawing at her body. The enemy was relentless, circling back for another attack, and she was their target. Her squadron was scattered, many jets forced to retreat or worse. But Sarah held her position, her eyes scanning the chaotic sky for any sign of weakness in the enemy's formation. The radio crackled with fragmented voices, some desperate, some defiant. "Hold on, Jensen. Support is on the way," came the encouraging words, but the delay felt endless. Suddenly, her radar picked up a new wave of enemy fighters approaching fast from the east. Her heart pounded. This was the moment that would decide everything. She tightened her grip on the joystick and steadied her breathing. The fight was far from over. As the enemy jets broke through the clouds, Sarah's squadron scrambled to form a defensive line. The sky erupted in a deadly ballet of twisting jets and flashing missiles. Sarah locked onto one of the lead attackers and fired. The missile streaked through the gray sky, finding its mark in a fiery explosion that lit up the clouds. But there was no time to celebrate. More fighters surged forward, guns blazing. Sarah's jet took another hit, a sharp jolt that sent her spiraling briefly. She fought to regain control, her training guiding her hands as she corrected the course. Damage to the left wing, the system warned. Her heart skipped a beat, but she refused to panic. Sarah adjusted her controls, compensating for the faltering wing. Her jet responded sluggishly, but it was still in the fight. She caught sight of an enemy fighter lining up behind her. Instinct took over as she flipped the jet into a tight barrel roll, shaking off the missile lock. Bullets tore through the sky around her, some grazing the fuselage with sparks flying. Her breath was shallow, but her mind razor-sharp. Her radio crackled again. "Jensen, fall back. Regroup with the squadron." The urgency was clear, but Sarah knew retreat wasn't an option yet. The base depended on them holding the skies. Suddenly, she spotted movement below, a small convoy of enemy ground forces making their way toward the base's perimeter. If they reached the defenses, the entire base would be at risk. Sarah made a split-second decision. "Cover me," she called to her squadron. She dove toward the ground, jet engines roaring in protest. The enemy vehicles looked vulnerable from above, but the descent was dangerous. Anti-aircraft fire erupted around her, tracer rounds snapping close. Sarah zigzagged through the bursts of fire, targeting the lead vehicle with precision-guided missiles. Explosions rocked the convoy, setting vehicles ablaze. The remaining trucks tried to scatter, but Sarah pressed the attack, determined to stop the ground threat before it could reach the base. Her squadron followed, providing cover as they pushed the enemy back. The battle had shifted from the skies to the earth below, and Sarah's resolve hardened. She wasn't just defending the base from above, she was protecting every life inside it. As the last enemy vehicle exploded, Sarah pulled up sharply, climbing back into the thick clouds. The radio was filled with rapid-fire reports, losses, damage, and urgent calls for reinforcements. The base was battered, but still standing. Fatigue gnawed at Sarah, but she refused to let it show. Every muscle ached, every breath was a struggle, but her mind remained locked on the mission. She was a guardian now, a shield between her home and destruction. The sun began to break through the clouds, casting a pale light over the battle-scarred landscape. The enemy jets were retreating, their formations breaking apart under the relentless defense. Sarah's squadron rallied, pushing the attackers back with renewed strength. A call came through the radio, this time calm and relieved. "Jensen, good work. You and your squad held the line." Sarah allowed herself a brief smile, though she knew the fight wasn't truly over. The damage to her jet was severe, and the base still bore the scars of battle. But they had survived. For now. As she guided her jet toward the runway, the roar of the engines mingled with the distant cheers of the ground crew. Sarah's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of what they had endured. The sky was quiet now, but the memory of a swarm still burned bright. She landed smoothly, taxiing to the hangar where her squadron was already gathering. The faces around her were tired, some marked by fear, others by relief. But all shared the same unspoken bond. They had faced the storm and lived to fight another day. Sarah climbed out of her jet, the cool air hitting her sweat-soaked face. She looked up at the sky, empty now, but forever changed. She was no longer hidden. She was a warrior. And this was only the beginning. The hangar was alive with hurried voices and flashing lights as Sarah stepped out of her damaged jet. Her legs felt unsteady, heavy from the fight and the strain of hours spent in the cockpit. Mechanics swarmed the aircraft, checking every inch for damage. She barely noticed. Her mind was racing, still tangled in the chaos of the battle. She pulled off her helmet, running a hand through her sweat-soaked hair. Around her, her squadron gathered, faces a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and grim determination. They had survived the impossible, but the war was far from over. A commanding officer approached, his face stern but proud. "Lieutenant Jensen, you did more than hold the line today. You saved this base." His words hit her harder than any missile. The weight of responsibility settled even deeper in her chest. Sarah swallowed, glancing around at the damage visible through the hangar doors. Burnt-out vehicles, cratered runways, and the scars of the relentless assault were impossible to ignore. The enemy's attack had been brutal, designed to break their spirit. But it hadn't worked. Inside, the tension was electric. They were all waiting for orders, knowing the next move could be just as deadly. Sarah's phone buzzed, a message from command. Reinforcements were en route, but they wouldn't arrive for hours. They had to hold their ground, whatever it took. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the pilots lost in the fight. Names and faces flashed through her mind like ghosts. The cost of war was high, and it was personal. She clenched her fists, determined to honor their sacrifice by staying strong. "Lieutenant," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was her wingman's commander. "We need you to lead a reconnaissance mission. We have intel suggesting the enemy is regrouping nearby, preparing for another strike." The request was heavy with urgency. Sarah nodded, pushing down the fatigue. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, sharper now than exhaustion. She was ready. "When do we move?" "In 20 minutes, the officer replied. "You'll take 2 pilots with you. Stay sharp." The briefing room was tense as Sarah reviewed maps and satellite images with her team. The enemy's movements were cautious but deliberate. The quiet before the storm. The knowledge that every moment could be their last weighed heavily on them all. Her 2 wingmen, both skilled pilots, listened intently as she outlined the plan. The mission was clear: gather intelligence, avoid engagement if possible, and return safely. But in war, plans often changed on a dime. As they climbed into their jets, the sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of red and orange. The beauty of the moment was stark against the grim reality of their mission. Sarah took a deep breath and throttled forward, jet roaring to life beneath her. The sky was calm at first, eerily silent compared to the chaos of earlier. Sarah scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of enemy activity. Her squadron flew tight, a small but determined force slicing through the twilight. Minutes stretched into tense hours. The recon mission tested their patience and nerves. Sarah's eyes flicked constantly between the instruments and the endless sky. The enemy was elusive, but the risk was real. Suddenly, the radar beeped, a fast-moving contact emerging from the distance. Sarah's heart leapt. Was this the enemy or a friendly unit returning? She signaled her wingmen to hold formation and prepared for anything. As the contacts drew closer, the shapes of enemy jets materialized, breaking the twilight calm. They were faster, more aggressive, and clearly prepared for battle. Sarah's voice was steady but urgent over the radio. "Engage only if necessary. We're here to observe, not fight." But the enemy had other plans. Missiles streaked toward them, shattering the fragile peace. The sky erupted once more into deadly combat. Sarah dove into action, her mind sharp, instincts honed from hours of previous battle. The reconnaissance mission had turned into another desperate fight for survival. Sarah's jet danced through the air, dodging missiles and returning fire. Her wingmen fought fiercely beside her, the bond between them unbreakable. The enemy pressed hard, but Sarah's squadron was relentless. They pushed back, forcing the attackers to retreat into the fading light. Exhausted but alive, Sarah called for immediate return to base. As they turned homeward, the weight of the day settled on her shoulders. The fight was far from over, but Sarah knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer just a pilot in hiding. She was a leader, a protector, and she would face whatever came next, head on. The sun was barely rising as Sarah's squadron touched down on the runway, engines roaring low as the jets slowed to a stop. The sky was tinged with the faintest light, promising a new day, but Sarah knew the fight was far from over. The battle had taken its toll, and the base still bore the scars of the enemy's assault. But there was something else now, a quiet strength that had grown within her and her squadron. As she climbed out of her jet, her body ached, but her mind was sharp. The reconnaissance mission had pushed them to the brink, but it had also revealed crucial information. The enemy was regrouping, planning another strike. But they were not invincible. Sarah's report would help prepare the base, buy precious time. Around her, mechanics and medics worked tirelessly, tending to damaged jets and wounded pilots. The sense of urgency was palpable, but so was a deep camaraderie. They were not just soldiers. They were a family forged in the fire of battle. Sarah's commanding officer approached, his face unreadable in the early morning light. "Jensen," he said, "your leadership today was vital. The intel you gathered has already been relayed to command. Reinforcements are being rerouted to support us." Relief washed over Sarah, but she kept her expression steady. This was not the end. It was just another step in a long journey. "Thank you, sir," she replied. "We'll be ready." Her mind drifted to the friends she had lost, pilots who had flown beside her just days before. Their sacrifice weighed heavy, but their courage inspired her. She promised herself she would carry their legacy forward, no matter the cost. The base commander gathered the pilots for a briefing. The mood was serious but hopeful. With the new intelligence, they could fortify defenses and prepare for the enemy's next move. Sarah listened intently, already formulating strategies in her mind. After the meeting, she found a quiet moment to look out over the runway. The sun's rays cast long shadows across the tarmac, illuminating the scars of battle. But there was also a quiet beauty, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind her. It was her wingman, still shaken but alive. "We made it through," he said quietly. "Because of you." Sarah shook her head, a tired smile breaking through. "Because of all of us. We survived together." The base was still vulnerable, but Sarah's confidence was unshakable. She had faced the swarm in the sky and come out stronger. She had found her place, not hidden in the shadows, but standing tall in the heart of the fight. As the day unfolded, preparations for the next battle were already underway. Pilots checked their gear, crews repaired aircraft, and commanders planned strategies. Sarah joined them, ready to lead once again. The sky above was vast and unpredictable, but Sarah knew one thing for certain. She would never be hidden again. She was a warrior, a guardian of the skies, and no enemy would take that from her. Her jet awaited, sleek and battle-worn, ready to rise once more. Sarah climbed in, the familiar hum of the engines filling her with purpose. The fight was far from over, but she was ready. With a final glance at the base below, she throttled forward, lifting into the morning light. The sky was hers to protect, and she would not let it fall.